Now, let's see. I do believe...
29.
Chapter,
Yep, there we are.
What chapter?
Chapter 42 of Genesis,
Verse 29.
verse 29. As you'll recall,
What chapter?
42. Now, just so you know, this whole part of this story covers chapters 42, 43, and at least part of 44. So it's a fairly lengthy dialogue here between Joseph and his brothers and what have you. But as Merrill mentioned, we left off at verse 29. But just to catch you back up, they had gone home. Joseph had apparently left orders that their money would be secretly returned to them. And when they stopped for the night at wherever it was, they were going to spend the night on their way back. And we're not really told which brother it was. Just says one of them in verse 27. We don't know which one that was. Opened his sack to feed his horse from some of the horse feed they had and realized, my money's still in here. And it's like, well, that could be a problem because they were afraid that they would be accused of stealing the grain. So anyway, that brings us to verse 29. It said, when it came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, and by the way, don't forget, in the area they were living, they were in southern Canaan. So on a camel caravan, we're probably talking about maybe a trip of anywhere from 3 or 4 days to maybe a week. Wouldn't have taken them any longer than that probably to get back. And I would venture to say, especially after the events of the first night, they probably picked up the pace a little bit. Why do you suppose that might be?
They were afraid about the money.
Well, I wanted to definitely get out of Egypt.
Yeah.
Because they figured, okay, if we're going to be accused of thievery, and this guy that, who's the prime minister, he's liable to send his soldiers after us. We need to get out of here. So they would have probably pushed it the second and third day. So what might have been a week's trip back to Bethel, I'm betting probably at this point they probably made in 3 or 4 days, but that's just my guess. It said, when it came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them, saying, the man, the Lord of the land, which again, notice how they mention this. They still have no clue this might be Joseph. The Lord of the land spoke harshly with us and took us for spies of the country. But he said to him, or we said to him, we are honest men. We are not spies. We are 12 brothers. Now notice they're back to being 12 brothers. They're including Joseph, who they think is dead. We're 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more, and the youngest is with our father today in the land of Canaan. Now, by the way, in this whole conversation with Jacob, both here and as we get into chapter 43, you're going to see some. I'm going to bring this to your attention now, so you be looking for it. They still consistently refer to Benjamin as the boy, because he's the youngest. But how old was Benjamin probably by this point?
31.
He's in his late 20s or early 30s. He's not a boy, but they keep referring to him as the boy.
We do that today.
Yeah. All right, we're 12 brothers, sons of our fathers. One is no more. The youngest was our father today in the land of Canaan. And the man, the Lord of the land, said to us, by this I shall know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers with me, and take grain for the famine of your households, and go. But bring your youngest brother to me, that I may know that you are not spies, but honest men. I will give your brother to you, and you may trade in the land. Now, it says you may trade in the land. What do you think Joseph is actually offering for them?
For them to sell their place and go to
Well,
live by him?
yeah, when he says you may trade in the land, the way Joseph is presenting this, it's not that you may buy food and go back. Joseph is actually offering them at this point already an opportunity to begin doing regular business there in Egypt. He's already kind of beginning to open the door to the possibility for them to move to Egypt, although they don't know this. So this is not, he doesn't say so that you can buy food. When he says you can trade in the land, the word he used there is basically you can begin doing business here.
Was it customary that if you came into the land that you had to have the permission from his title
No,
to be able to trade?
no, there was caravans that went back and forth doing business in Egypt all the
I
time.
was going to say,
I mean, consider the Ishmaelites when that
Nomadic.
sold Joseph there. That was a normal thing. The reason that they needed special permission at this point is because they were buying food and what was going on at the time.
there was a famine.
There was a famine, so there was a moratorium on trading food unless you had special permission.
Okay.
If they had gone and traded furs or jewels or any other kind of commodity, wouldn't have made any difference. But they were there to get food, and so for that reason, they had to go to the boss man to get permission.
But they were also under suspicion, so they had to get themselves out from under suspicion to be able to trade freely.
Well, as far as they knew, they were under suspicion.
That's the game he's playing.
Uh-huh. All right, let's see. All right, verse 35 says, Now it came about, as they were emptying their sacks, that behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. When they and their father saw their bundles of money, they were dismayed. Now, notice how this mentions this. It does not say every brother's bundle, every man's bundle. What does that tell us as a possibility going on here?
The whole caravan?
They had servants with them. So you got 10 brothers plus whatever servants they took with them. So imagine this. This is a major caravan going down there. Each one of them's on a camel who's probably carrying them plus whatever else. You've probably got at least one other camel tied, that camel is leading, plus a bunch of servants. There could have been as many as 30 or 40 camels in this caravan.
Well, isn't it really saying that, and when they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were afraid? Is that not implying it was just the 10 brothers?
Well, yeah, at that point, but the fact that it says every man's bundle, and there's another reason why there's a good possibility it was more than just the brothers, but probably a group of servants as well. As we continue into this, you can tell that there were several months, in fact, possibly as long as a year, between this trip and the following trip when they go back to get Simeon. And if you've got an entire family with kids, wives, grandkids, and we know Jacob had a whole pile of servants, how much food do you think they had to go get?
A lot.
You're looking at a year's supply. That's a lot of food.
And they were offering up grain, just basic,
Uh-huh.
not much.
Enough to cook. That's a lot of flour.
Yeah.
a lot of bread, a lot of cake. So, bottom line is, when it says every man's bundle, I don't think it's just the 10 brothers. You got servants that probably opened their sacks and they're looking at you like, sir, you need to come check this bundle too. But why does the next verse say, just their father? Because would the servants have been in the presence of Jacob? After they got back, they unload all their stuff, they check what they've got. The servants don't get to go in to talk to Jacob and say, sir, we got a problem here. They would have told the brothers, and then who gets to go talk to Jacob? The brothers do. Servants don't get to go talk to the big boss. All right, verse 36 says, and their father Jacob said to them, you have bereaved me of my children. Notice, first thing out of Jacob's mouth, what does he do? Starts throwing blame around. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more, and you would take Benjamin? All these things are against me. Now, other than the fact that they mentioned in verse 34, what's that? Other than in verse 34, they haven't really had much of a conversation about Benjamin. Just that's what the landlord there in Egypt told us to do. So at this point, he's already in his mind jumped ahead and thinking, well, we're already pretty sure Joseph's dead. Now notice what he has done with Simeon.
Already written him off.
He's written him off. All because the big boss in Egypt wants Benjamin to come down there. What does that tell you is going on in Jacob's mind at this point?
He wants to kill Benjamin too.
Well, yeah, but Jacob apparently hadn't learned his lesson yet about playing favorites with his kids. He's willing to give his second oldest son, just basically write him off, all to protect Benjamin. And he has no guarantee, no real suspicion that there's any ill intent here. Just the fact that they told him the man wants to physically see our youngest brother, and in Jacob's mind, he fast forwards to, Joseph's dead, might as well write off Simeon, and you want to give him Benjamin too.
Woe is me.
Pretty much, but it's not just woe is me. The fact that Jacob still, as far as playing favorites with his kids, has not learned his lesson. Although I think he will before we're done. So you'll take all these things are against me. Then Reuben, verse 37. By the way, which one in the order of birth is Reuben?
Oldest.
He's the oldest. But important point to keep in mind as we go through this, and Reuben makes this offer. Well, let's just read it. It says, Reuben spoke to his father, saying, you may put my 2 sons to death if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my care, and I will return him to you. Now, Reuben basically is saying, well, you can sacrifice my 2 kids. Well, now, is that a real offer here?
It's a dumb offer.
Well, because from Jacob's perspective, what are those 2 kids?
Grandchildren.
Yeah, he's saying, well, you can kill your 2 grandkids here. That's not an offer. But the point is that Reuben gets nowhere with this. Why? Why does Jacob basically ignore Reuben in this exchange?
Because he's not going to give Benjamin up no matter what.
Well, not going to give Benjamin up, but there's another problem with this. Where's Reuben stand in all of this with his relationship with his dad?
He gets the inheritance.
Well, Reuben's been on the outs with his dad for several years now. Remember also, What happened at Bethel?
He slept with one of his dad's concubines.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, Reuben was one of the ones, as I recall, that was involved in the slaughter of an entire town. Reuben, Simeon, and Levi. So, Simeon's on the outs. So the fact that Simeon's in prison in Egypt, he figured, well, that's no big loss. Simeon wasn't, because Simeon was on the outs with his dad because of that slaughter. Levi was, Reuben was, and as you just mentioned, Reuben had already gotten caught sleeping with one of his dad's own concubines. So do you think Jacob at this point cares what Reuben has to say? Reuben's lucky at this point that he's still able to even be in his, as part of his dad's household. So Jacob pays no attention to this. Verse 38 says, but Jacob said, my son. Now notice here, not your brother or anything of that, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead and he alone is left.
He alone is left. He's the only one I care about.
That's exactly what he's saying.
What are we, chopped liver?
That's the problem here.
Yeah.
Is all of these brothers are standing around listening to this, and Jacob is letting them know under no uncertain terms, the only one of you out of this whole bunch that matters is Benjamin.
Well, he didn't have a problem with the part where he was fathering all those children.
So, as we have seen over the last 10 chapters or so, Jacob has come a long way in his relationship with God, but he's still got one big issue. He hadn't done much with his relationship with his own family. If anything, he's digging himself even deeper here, where I'm frankly surprised that his brothers didn't basically just write him off. But anyway, we'll see. God had other plans. It said, if harm should befall him on the journey you are taking, then you will bring my gray hair down to Sheol in sorrow. Now, some of the other translations may say, bring me down to the grave or something of that sort. That's essentially what the Hebrew word Sheol means. But all of this for Benjamin. And Benjamin's not a little boy. Benjamin's a grown man by this point. But what do you think the other brothers, as they're sitting around listening to this, are thinking regarding their own relationship with Jacob?
Yeah, I'll throw Benjamin in the pit too.
They're probably, I wouldn't be surprised, on the verge of thinking, Dad hadn't learned a thing. We got rid of Joseph and now we got to deal with Benjamin. All because they're the only two sons of Rachel. Which, now, that takes it another step. We've been looking at how the sons relate to their dad. What do you think that Leah and the two concubines are thinking at all this? They certainly at some point would have been privy to all of this conversation. What do you think Leah's thinking? The fact that my husband is only worried about, my nephew, and he doesn't give a rip about, us or my boys. I think Jacob might have had a little problem with family relationships. I'd say that's putting it mildly.
Kind of amazing the family stayed together.
But all of this tells us that when you look at how dysfunctional this family is, there's one thing that would answer that question right there. What held that family together?
God.
Or maybe we should say, who held that family together? It wasn't Jacob. All right, let's go on into chapter 43. Now, the famine was severe in the land. So it came about, when they had finished eating the grain which they had brought from Egypt, that their father said to them, go back, buy us a little food. Now, notice how it couches this, as far as the way it describes it. The famine was severe. Well, we already knew that, and now they've gone through an entire caravan of grain and food. How long do you think it's been from the first trip to now till Jacob's telling them to go back for more?
Months at least.
At least several months,
A year,
and possibly a year,
yeah.
from one growing season to the next. Now, the one thing that as we read through this, Moses does not mention. Frankly, I'm kind of surprised that God did not lead Moses to say anything about him, but this is, I guess, part of the story that God just chose not to share with us. But who's missing in all of this?
The women,
The women are missing, but not just them. Where's Simeon?
He's still in jail.
He's still in prison. All of this time, they're sitting there eating grain, going for probably months, or as you mentioned, possibly a year. And Simeon, all this time, still sitting in prison.
Joseph's got to be wondering if they're ever going to bother to come back.
I'm sure that probably crossed Joseph's mind. I guarantee you it crossed Simeon's mind. Simeon's probably wondering, my brother's ever going to come back for me?
Am I doomed? Am I toast here?
Now look at it from Simeon's perspective. Do you think Simeon knows what the conditions are for his release? They got to come back with Benjamin.
Yeah, fat chance.
So, exactly. Do you think Simeon knows of his dad's favoritism? I wouldn't be surprised if Simeon's probably sitting there thinking,
They're
I'm
never
go-
coming back.
I'm going to spend the rest of my life in this prison. I'm never going to see the light of the free world again because they're not coming back for me. Dad won't let them bring Benjamin back. So I have a feeling that that was a long, drawn out several months or a year for Simeon.
I'm starting to wonder why they didn't just scheme up a little scheme of their own to kidnap Benjamin and take him down there
Well,
against Dad's wishes.
they
you know?
could have, but also keep in mind who controls all the servants. Jacob did.
And all the inheritance.
And the inheritance. And if they'd have just disappeared one day and he noticed Benjamin was gone, he probably had enough servants to send them after him. And if Jacob says, go get them and bring Benjamin back, that's probably exactly what would have happened. Now, verse 3. Notice now, it says, Judah spoke to him. Not Reuben, not Levi. Remember, Judah's number 4 in the order as far as who's the oldest.
And he's not on the outs with Dad.
Yeah, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and then Judah. Judah had nothing to do with the massacre, where the entire town was destroyed. Judah, unlike Reuben, wasn't sleeping with daddy's concubine. Now, Reuben had some moral problems of his own, but it did not involve his dad. So, Judah is the next in line as far as those who might still have some influence with dear old dad. So it says, Judah spoke to him, however, saying, the man solemnly warned us, you shall not see my face again unless your brother is with you. If you send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. But if you do not send him, we will not go down. For the man said to us, you shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. Now, if Reuben had said this, Levi probably would not have had much of an impact. But now notice who is now emerging as the spokesman for all the brothers. Judah is. And of course, who is and became the patriarch, and especially the one who's the patriarch of the Messianic line?
Judah.
Judah. And while we have not gotten there yet, in fact, we're pretty sure it's in the last chapter of Genesis. when Jacob issues his blessings and patriarchal prophecy of his sons, Judah is the one at that point that Jacob even says, and I quote, "The scepter shall not depart from the tribe of Judah." So we haven't gotten there yet, but the time will come when even Jacob himself will recognize that Judah is the one who's going to lead the nation. Not Reuben, Simeon, or Levi, Judah will. All right, so at this point, Jacob knows the brothers have him over a barrel. Because speaking for all of them, Judah makes it clear, Benjamin goes with us or we will not go. Now, why doesn't Jacob mount up a camel, grab his servants, and go himself?
Isn't he old?
He's getting pretty old by this point. He is not at a point where he can make that kind of trip.
Well, also, he must know what Judah has said, you will not see my face. Well, if you don't see his face, you don't get any food.
That's the other thing.
So, he knows it
Bring-
will be, you know,
Mhm.
no win situation.
Bring the brother or no deal.
Right.
So anyway, in any event, Jacob knows they got him over a barrel at this point. Verse 6 says, now notice, no longer calls him Jacob, but says, then Israel said. Why does this switch now to the name Israel instead of Jacob? Because we're looking at another major event in the fulfillment of prophecies that ultimately will lead to this entire group ultimately going to Egypt in fulfillment of prophecy. So at this point, Moses refers to him as Israel, not Jacob. And by the way, what fulfillment of prophecy is about to occur? Think Joseph's dream.
They're gonna-
Father,
They're all going to bow.
They're
They've already
bow
bowed down
down.
before him.
Yeah, but that didn't fulfill the prophecy because who was there, or should say who wasn't there?
The mother and father were also included
Benjamin
in that
was
group.
That will happen.
Benjamin wasn't
Yeah.
there. All of his
Joseph said that in his dream, 11 of them bowed down before him. Well,
Joseph said,
And then like
there
the
weren't
moon and the
11 of
star.
them there, but there's about to be. So that prophecy is about to be fulfilled. So Israel said, why did you treat me so badly by telling the man whether you still had another brother? Well, now that's kind of a dumb question, but
Yeah, he's basically asking him, why didn't you lie?
exactly.
To protect my precious little boy, that you know, my favorite.
Yeah, but they said, the man questioned particularly about us and our relatives, saying, is your father still alive? Have you another brother? So we answered his questions. Could we possibly know that he would say, bring your brother down? So, I mean, they're the ones using common sense here. Jacob is just pulling his hair out going, woe is me. Everybody's against me. And Judah said to his father, notice again, Judah's the one stepping forward and being the family spokesman here. Judah said to his father Israel, send the lad with me. Now, by the way, notice the lad. The man's 30 years old. Send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, we as well as you and our little ones. So, obviously, he's got a pile of grandkids by this point, too.
Yeah.
I myself will be surety for him. You may hold me responsible for him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame. By the way, in the original Hebrew, the phrase is there, I shall have sinned before you all my days. But the translators, at least for the New American Standard, kind of rephrase that as, let me bear the blame. Before you forever. For if we had not delayed, surely by now we could have returned twice. So that kind of gives you an idea. It's been a few months. Because Judah's saying we could have been down and back and down and back at least twice in this amount of time.
Don't we do that?
Hmm?
Don't we do that kind of stuff ourselves? Oh, I'll go to the doctor later when you finally go, it wasn't a big deal and you should have gone to begin with so you didn't worry for 2 months.
Yeah.
Not that anybody in the room has ever done that.
Nah.
Nah.
Nah. All right. Well, we'll go through verse 15 and we'll call it quits for the night. All right. Verse 11 says, Then their father Israel said to them, If it must be so, then do this. Take some of the best products of the land in your bags. Carry down the man as a present, or down to the man as a present. A little balm, a little honey, aromatic gum and myrrh, pistachio nuts and almonds. And take double the money in your hand, and take back in your hand the money that was returned in the mouth of your sacks. Perhaps it was a mistake. Notice, Jacob's got enough common sense here to realize that if they are going to go back, and if there's going to be any problems, what's the best way to butter a man up?
Bribe him.
Yep, come in with a whole pile of stuff and say, oh, look what we got for you. Which tells us all of these things he's telling them to take. There may be a famine in the land,
But they still got.
but,
They're not totally destitute.
yeah,
Still
but
got
Canaan,
goodies.
yeah, there may be a famine of food, but Canaan's got plenty of other stuff. They are apparently, as a family, and as a, I won't say a nation, because Canaan at this time wasn't really a nation, but as a land, they had plenty. God had blessed them. Perhaps it was a mistake. Take your brother also, and arise, return to the man, and may God Almighty grant you compassion in the sight of the man, that he may release to you your other brother and Benjamin. Notice again, he doesn't say release Simeon, it's just your other brother. Jacob has got issues here. If this is a direct quotation of what Jacob said, he doesn't even have the courtesy to call his second oldest son by his name. It's just your other brother and Benjamin.
At least in here, he's like assuming that he's still alive and going to be released.
Mm-hmm. But the one thing, though, that we do see some level of beginning maturity. First off, in verse 14, notice he doesn't just say may God, he says may God Almighty. El Shaddai is actually the word he uses here, or the name. So he's taken a step from just referring to God generically. He says, may El Shaddai give us compassion. Also, there's a big lesson in this, and his reference to El Shaddai is a clue to what's going on, at least with Jacob. Why did Jacob, other than his own personal favoritism and the fact that he still hasn't learned to treat his whole family, with some level of equality, but it's playing favorites. I mean, we see that, but what does this whole interaction tell you about Jacob's faith at this point? Well, consider this. Over the previous, and I'm not counting the 20 years that Joseph's been gone, but the previous 20 years before that, how many times did Jacob personally encounter God? At least about 3 times that I can think of off the top of my head. And there were times that God personally spoke to him. God protected him. But then when it comes down to his precious younger boy, what's Jacob's response here?
God Almighty.
To pray to
He
God
had-
for compassion.
He has no faith in that he knows God has protected him, but he has no faith that God's going to protect his family. Well, here's part of the problem. What was one of the major beliefs that so many people in that day and age had that Jacob can't seem to get past? Remember, a lot of these people
Gods
back
are
then.
local.
Yeah, there you go. A lot of people back then had this idea in their head that there was no almighty God, that there were multiple gods, and that each god was a god of a particular area. Now, God has already shown Jacob that and he told him, I will be with you no matter where you go. God told him that. But Jacob can't get that, into his head that I worship a God who's everywhere. He still thinks of his God as some local God, and if we go down to down to Egypt, guess what? Well, God's not down there. Those are where the Egyptian gods are. That's another reason he's very leery about letting Benjamin go, because, well, Benjamin might be out of God's reach. So what he's doing here is he doesn't trust, after all he's seen in the previous 20 years, he still has not learned to trust God, that God not only will protect him, but protect his family, and that he can protect him no matter where he goes. So finally, at this point, he throws his arms up and says, well, whatever. May God Almighty, maybe he'll, be with you and give you compassion. And this guy said, but as for me, if I'm bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. In other words, well, woe is me, whatever. So the men took this present, and they took double the money in their hand and Benjamin. Then they arose and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. This is the lesson, I think, out of all this that Jacob needs to learn. Not only does Jacob need to quit playing favorites with his family, but God is forcing Jacob to deal with the possibility that maybe God's bigger than Jacob thinks he is.
Did Jacob ever learn that?
That's a real good question.
Ask him someday.
I will say this much. It's apparently a lesson that the family, and ultimately the Israelites, took generations after this to learn. And I'll tell you why even the Bible supports that possibility. What is the first commandment?
Thou shalt have no other gods before me.
Before me.
We have no other gods before me. Well, why would that have to be the first commandment if they knew by that point there was no other God? They still think there are other gods. And God has to step in as they are on, at Sinai, and through Moses tell them, I am the only God you're going to have. Don't put any other God before me. That would not have even had to have been stated if they knew by that point there were no other gods. That was a hard lesson that it took them generations to get through their head.
A lot of them made their own gods.
And if God didn't do what they wanted, then they just come up with one. As we saw that they did when, God even had to tell Moses, well, Moses, you better get on back down there. They done messed up already.
They were making gods.
They're down there making gods again.
And they spent the next how many hundred years adopting the idols of other false gods? It's...
So, when God said in His Word that, they're a stiff-necked people, I don't think that was an overstatement. But then there's another lesson for us out of that, is we need to learn as well that salvation's not something you earn. God chose them, whether they deserved it or not. They definitely did not deserve it. Yet God chose them. And we need to realize as well, and thank God that God has seen fit to grant us salvation, because how many of us in this room deserve it?
None of us.
None of us. And given that if we were in the same situation, we might be just as bad or worse than they were. And sometimes we are. But God has granted us salvation in spite of ourselves. And that's a hard lesson sometimes for people to learn. We don't deserve it. All right, we'll pick up there on Sunday. Any more questions?